Hello all, a great afternoon and a warm welcome to each and every one of you watching this video. So to introduce myself, this is Sureka Bhaskar, who is actually dealing with these particular, important organizations and the locations or the regions in focus and news. And of course, this video is a part of your Prelims Masterclass 2025, where we have actually picked up the topmost or the 100 most important current affairs topics which have a high potential of appearing in your upcoming prelims examination 2025. Okay, as you all know, or if you're watching me for the first time, I would like to say that we had actually started with this prelims masterclass for different subjects, and you would have seen me handling environment and ecology. After that, we moved into the government schemes and the programs, post which we discussed reports as well as indices in the news, where we covered different global reports as well as indices. What are the takeaways, whether India has actually improved or it has had a setback in its ranking and performance, etc. Okay, then we actually started with this particular concept of international organizations, and after doing international organizations, we'll be discussing about important regions in focus or important places in news, and then we will move on to discuss about the miscellaneous topics like the awards, and also we'll discuss about what are all the various defense exercises of which India was a part of, or the other exercises which were in the news for the past 1.5 years, starting from January 2025 till March or April, starting from 2024 of January till March or April 2025. Okay. So, we are dealing with international organizations. If you ask me if this is the first class of IR, no, we have already done with one class where we had started with the most important organizations under the United Nations. Okay, so let's actually have a quick recall as a part of our daily routine. Okay, so we started with international organization. Just a minute, let me. Okay. So we had actually started with the international organizations. Okay, so if you can recall, the first organization we started with was the United Nations. As I told you that we had the World War I, and there was actually another organization which was what, the League of Nations, which was not very fruitful because it resulted in this particular World War II. We saw what was the reason for this World War II, what were the two different factions that actually fought in this World War II, and it was actually, the fuel to this particular fire was added when Germany invaded Poland in the year 1939, and towards the end of 1945, there was actually a need for establishment of an international organization which actually discussed dialogue as well as diplomacy over war, and which established peace and which promoted harmony across the global nations, and an organization which actually prevented any kind of further conflict. And that was how the United Nations was actually born, and it is headquartered in New York, United States. And we saw different arms or the different organs associated with the trusteeship council suspended. We have 5 other organizations or the organs which actually include the UNGA, and then you had the UNSC, and then we had the ICJ, that is the International Court of Justice. And today we'll be dealing with ICC, and we'll be seeing what are the differences between ICJ and ICC. And then also we had the ECOSOC as well as anything did we miss? Yeah, the Secretariat. Okay, so these were all the different organs of the United Nations. Okay, so after discussing that, we actually saw what were all the recommended reforms of the UNSC that was actually given by India. Okay, reforms to UNSC, and India said there were some areas in terms of the permanent membership to the UNSC which has to be extended, so that it is a representative of all the other countries across the globe as well. So we actually looked at the model that has been proposed by India, whether it will work or not. Then we moved forward in order to discuss about this particular UN peacekeeping forces. Okay, so UN peacekeeping was our second topic, or they were called as the blue helmets. Okay, Then we discussed about what are these forces, whether they are voluntary or what is the contribution of India or other country, where we saw Bangladesh was actually the country that was supplying more of, capital or human capital to the to the UN peacekeeping forces. Okay, and then India recently commemorated the 76th day or 76th year of this particular peacekeeping forces. Okay, so this is what we discussed here. Then moving forward, we discussed about the UN Statistical Commission, where we actually understood this organization was the apex organization in order to oversee all the statistics, that is the collection, the dissemination, the analysis, as well as the final output of data with respect to that of the economic growth, the environmental sustainable efforts, etc. Okay, so this is what we saw, that is UN Statistical Commission. Now moving forward, we saw an interesting article on the membership of Palestine to the United Nations. Okay, so here we discussed about what are the ways in which a particular nation can be a member, or you can say part of the United Nations, whether it requires the unanimous voting of the 5 Security Council members, what is the role of the non-permanent members, and whether it requires an amendment to the UN Charter, and what is the UN Charter, whether it is a fundamental or the guiding framework on which the United Nations functions. All that we actually discussed. Moving forward, we looked at the UNRWA, which is nothing but the United Nations Relief, United Nations Relief and Work Agency to protect or to support the Palestinian refugees. Okay, so this organization we actually saw, where the specifically you saw the countries like the US as well as the other Western, specifically the European countries, had actually withdrawn their support or funding to this particular agency of UNRWA. Okay, and how is it going to be impactful on Palestine? All that we discussed here. Then we moved on to this particular article of Article 99 of the United Nations Charter, which has been introduced by the UN chief. Okay, so here we saw what is the UN Charter and what is the power it actually entrusts on the Security Council, what is the power does the secretary actually have, and in what are all the matters he has to inform the UNSC in order to take a decision of immediate nature. All that we discussed. And moving forward, we saw that India has actually appealed or has applied or submitted its application in order to carry out its explorations, that is the mineral explorations in the seabed. Okay, so here we had to discuss about what is this International Seabed Authority. Okay, whether it is a part of other 2 organs that have been set up under the UNCLOS, that is the United Nations Convention on Laws of Seas. That included what? One was the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, and the next one is the body, okay, in order to decide the limits of the continental shelf. Okay, so that we saw. And the third body was this particular Seabed Authority. And we also saw what is the contiguous zone, what is the exclusive economic zone, the continental shelf, the continental slope, the continental rays, as well as the seabed area, as well as the concept of high seas. Okay, then we moved on to discuss about the international maritime organization. So, International Maritime Organization. So, what is this maritime organization? Whether India is a part of this maritime organization or not, when did it come into existence, and what are all the different provisions under this particular organization? All that we discussed over here. And then we moved on to discuss about the International Postal Union. Okay, where India commemorated the 150th anniversary of the International Postal Union by releasing so many stamps, okay, postage stamps. So this is what we discussed. And then we spoke about the International Telecommunication Union. So International Telecommunication Union. Okay, and this particular assembly was recently conducted in New Delhi. Okay, so we discussed about what is this International Telecommunication Union, and how does it actually help in telecommunication across different countries by specifying or giving what to say the licenses or the permission in order to use different spectrums for different satellites and communication purposes. All that we saw. The next one we saw that India has actually contributed to around 500,000 towards this international counter terrorism organization trust fund. Okay, so we looked at this one and what is the aim and objective and what is the point and why India actually contributes to this particular organization, all that we discussed. Okay, so after discussing these particular topics, now we will move on to our next set of topics which I will be telling one by one. Okay, so today we'll actually be starting with the first body, that is the World Trade Organization. Okay, so World Trade Organization. So what happened was that the different countries across the globe actually realized that there is a need to have an international body. Okay, so this international body actually has to take care of what all the international trade related regulations as well as the rules, and that is why this World Trade Organization was actually born, as all the countries actually came together and signed the Marrakesh Agreement of 1994. Okay, so before that we had something called as GATT, that is nothing but the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, and that was exclusively dealing with what? The trade in the goods. But now they wanted a more holistic body which will actually take care of what? The not only the goods but also services, intellectual property, innovation, creativity, all those things, and that is why this World Trade Organization had was born. Okay, so we will discuss about what is WTO, who are the members of WTO, and what are the issues specifically India had with respect to that of WTO. Okay, specifically with respect to the agricultural subsidies, that is however your mains related concept, so you need to know about the WTO. Okay, now moving forward, we will be dealing with BRICS, which actually stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So this is actually called as BRICS, and now you have Brazil as the president. Okay, so the chair actually rotates yearly, and this is what now you actually have Brazil who is having the presidency, and this actually announced that Indonesia is a member that currently joined as of 2025 in this particular regional grouping. Okay, so this is called as BRICS. Now moving forward, we will be discussing about the G7 group of countries. Okay, so why this is actually in news? Because the 50th meeting of the G7 actually took place in Italy, and where Indian Prime Minister also participated. Okay, so that is why the G7 grouping is actually new. So what is the G7 grouping? What are all the countries which are part of the G7? Whether it has the European countries? Yes, it actually has Italy, France as well as Germany. Apart from that, it has UK, it has US, it has Canada as well as Japan. So these are the 7 countries. When you add one more country, that is Russia, to this G7, it becomes G8. And leaving alone Russia, if you add 4 more, then it actually becomes a group of G10. We will see where we'll have Sweden, we will have Netherlands, we will have Belgium, and all those countries joining. Okay, so this is what is the grouping. Next one is your Quad, that is nothing but your Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. So Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, this is called as Quad. Okay, so here you have 4 countries. One, you have the India, then you have the US, and then you have Japan as well as Australia. Okay, so we will see how this particular Quad, which initially started as a humanitarian assistance organization, has now transcended to a strategic or a diplomatic alliance facing different kind of regional challenges. Okay, so we'll be looking at this particular Quad grouping. Moving forward, we will be discussing about the recent ruling or the arrest warrant that has been provided by the International Criminal Court. Okay, so International Criminal Court. So International Criminal Court has recently told ICC has recently what issued warrant in order to arrest the Israeli Prime Minister on account of genocide. Okay, that is because resulting in the death of a lot or a greater number of mankind. Okay, so let us actually discuss what is this particular International Criminal Court and how it is different from ICJ, that is International Court of Justice, whether it is a part of United Nations or not, or whether ICC, whether it is a part of it, whether it's an apex body, whether it actually punishes or imposes penalties on on the individuals or the organizations or the states which are a part to it, whether it is involved in dispute resolution. So all that we'll be discussing here. Then we will move on to an interesting tripartite grouping, that is the AUKUS, which is Australia, UK, US tripartite grouping, where Australia recently has actually signed a particular deal under the AUKUS, stating there has to be a need for sharing these nuclear information as well as secrets. Okay, so we'll be discussing about what is this particular AUKUS, where AUKUS is nothing but it majorly focuses on what the defense technology. Okay, whereas if you see how it is different from that of Quad is actually it focuses on the regional security, the economic growth as well as the infrastructural development. Okay, so that is Quad. You need to know the difference between what is Quad as well as what is AUKUS. Next, moving on, we will be discussing about NATO. This is Atlantic North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is nothing but NATO. Okay, so we'll be discussing about how recently the US President Mr. Donald Trump has actually said that he would not back up any NATO allies if they do not sponsor or contribute to the defense spending. Okay, so this is what is the article. This is what is the Article 5 that got introduced after the 9/11 attack on USA. The countries actually came together and they signed something called as what the collective security principle. Okay, so we'll be looking at what is this collective security principle. Okay, and what are what is the kind of eligibility criteria should the members actually have, whether any European nation can be a part of NATO or not, what are their defense spendings, all that we will look in this particular article. Next one, we will be looking at the combined maritime forces. What is the next topic? Combined maritime forces. So in this article, we will be seeing the INS Talwar has actually confiscated around 1000 kgs of drugs in the Arabian Sea in an operation which it actually coordinated with the combined maritime forces. So we will be looking at what are these combined maritime forces, who actually takes the leadership, how the leadership rotates, what's the composition, all that we will look at. Okay. Next, moving on, we will be looking at the 5I Alliance. Okay, 5I Alliance. This is nothing but it is a group of 5 English speaking countries or English speaking intelligence network. Okay, intelligence network, where you actually have your US, you have Canada, and then you have UK, you have Australia as well as New Zealand. Okay, so here one of the members, that is Canada, had actually placed an allegation. Okay, placed an allegation on India with its potential link on the killing of a Khalistan extremist. Okay, whereas now New Zealand has actually questioned Canada's claims. Okay, so this is where we will be discussing about the 5I Alliance and what is the major objective or the mission and vision of this particular grouping. Okay, then we will be discussing about L69 grouping along with G4 as well as C10 grouping. Okay, and all these regional groupings have actually asked, okay, or have strongly voted for reforms in the UNSC, that is United Nations Security Council. Do you understand? So United Nations Security Council is what they wanted to reform. Okay, so this is what it is. Next one, if you look at the next topic, this is nothing but your asset recovery interagency network, asset recovery interagency network of the Asia Pacific. Okay, so here we will be discussing about ARIN and what is the composition, who are all the members of the ARIN and what are the key objectives. Okay, and then as you see we will be discussing about Interpol, which is nothing but the international police or the criminal police organization, which actually issues warrants, okay, or the notices in order to arrest individuals or the defaulters. And we will be looking at different kinds of notices that the Interpol actually comes up with. The next one we'll be discussing about the organization for petroleum, or organization of petroleum exporting countries, petroleum exporting countries, where these OPECs along with OPEC plus have decided to continue or to extend their deep oil cuts into 2025 also. We will be discussing about what do you mean by the oil cuts and what is the percentage of oil exports, what is the production, what is the status of India's imports as well as exports, all that we will see here. Next one, we will be discussing about the Indo-Pacific economic framework for prosperity, economic framework for prosperity. So here we will be looking at what kind of a framework is this and what are the economic regions in which it actually provides support to different countries, all that we'll be discussing here. So these are the 15 topics that we will potentially be discussing today, provided time actually permits. So far if you guys have any doubt, you can actually ask me, otherwise we can start with our lecture. Okay, so these are the topics that we will be starting with. So the first one, I will actually go in a little rapid pace because we have to complete 15 organizations today, so that we will complete remaining of the organizations tomorrow. That is your so that is when your international organizations will be complete. After that we will be starting with regional groupings, like you have the ASEAN, and then you have BIMSTEC, then Mercosur, all those we'll be covering. And then we'll have to move to the geopolitics, the treaties and agreements that actually arise out of the bilateral agreements. And after that we will move to the important military exercises and then the miscellaneous. Okay, so we have to cover a lot of topics, so that is why let us actually quickly cover each topic one by one. Okay, so now let me quickly start with the World Trade Organization. Okay, so the WTO recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Marrakesh Agreement, 1994. That resulted in the birth of WTO, and earlier there was GATT. Okay, so what do you mean by GATT? GATT was nothing but it was the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. Okay, so this exclusively dealt with the trade on goods, whereas they wanted to have a particular organization that dealt with services, intellectual properties, creation, innovation, etc. So that is why we had the Marrakesh Agreement of 1994, and after which this particular body of WTO was born. So this is actually the backdrop of the WTO. Okay, so it celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Marrakesh Agreement. Now let's quickly move forward and see what is this WTO. Okay, so a body that is a global body in order to oversee the trade rules as well as regulations was established. Okay, it was required. Okay, so it was required among the nations. That is why in the Marrakesh Agreement, which got signed in 1994, it was signed by around 123 countries. Okay, in the Uruguay round, or after the Uruguay round of negotiations of GATT. Okay, so I told you earlier we had the GATT and that had the Uruguay round, and after the Uruguay round got over in 1994, we had the Marrakesh Agreement that got signed. After that, WTO was established, and that officially came into force after a year, that is in 1995. Okay, so now let us see the difference between GATT as well as WTO. So GATT was a predecessor organization of WTO, and this was established in the year 1947. Only 23 countries were there after World War II in order to see the international trade of the goods. Okay, so GATT predominantly dealt with goods. So it dealt with goods, but WTO actually has a broader spectrum or broader scope where it actually covers the services, and then you have the intellectual property. So where you have the inventions, designs, creativity, and so on. Where is it headquartered? Geneva, Switzerland. Current membership 166 member countries, and who are the recent ones who are added? They are Comoros and Timor-Leste. So these actually became the 165th and the 166th members of 2024. Okay, so this is about the World Trade Organizations, which was a successor of your GATT. Okay, next one, if you see the functions that this WTO actually performs, the first one is it actually administers the TRPM. What do you mean by TRPM? These are trade related policy measures. Okay, trade related policy measures. This is TRPM. Okay, next one, what does it do? What are all the policy measures that are actually required for the trade of goods, services, etc. Next one is monitor the domestic trade policies. Okay, so what are the trade policies? That is why India also has a lot of issues ongoing with respect to the subsidies that it actually gives for the field of agriculture. So how does it affect the global competitiveness? All that are a region of debate for India. The next one is handle the trade related disputes also. Here, when two countries actually have a trade related disputes, or when they want to establish the clause of most favored nation, that is the MFN, or when they want to have the FTA with any other partner, all that is decided over here, and then it cooperates with the IMF and IBRD. Okay, what do you mean by IBRD? It is one of the major institutions of the World Bank. Okay, so World Bank has two major institutions. One is IBRD. This is nothing but the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Reconstruction and Development. And the next one, this was somewhere around 1944. The next one is your IDA. This is nothing but your International Development Association, IDA. Okay, 1960s or 66, I think. Okay, so these are the two organizations, and the WTO actually has close association or cooperation with IMF as well as IBRD. Then it provides an open forum for discussion with respect to your trade related agreements like TRIPS, GATT, etc. Okay. Next one, offer technical assistance for different countries on how further they have to move the process of trade. So this is what is your function of WTO. Now moving forward, what is the composition or the governance structure? First, you have the WTO Ministerial Conference. This is nothing but gathering of representatives from different member countries. Okay, so this is the highest decision making body of WTO, and the conference is actually held biennially, that is once in 2 years. Next one, you have a dispute settlement body. This is nothing but there is a general council. So this acts as a dispute settlement body, okay, in order to settle or resolve the disputes between two WTO members. Then what all it can do? So this can actually establish the dispute panels, okay. Here it can actually refer cases also for arbitration. Next, they can adopt the panel and the appellate body reports and oversee whether these reports are being properly implemented. And finally, authorize the suspension of concessions if the rulings do not, or if people don't, or the members don't comply with this particular ruling. Okay, then the dispute settlement body is made up of all the member governments, usually represented by the ambassadors. Okay, so this is what is the organization structure. And then if you see the appellate body, it is actually a 7-member body. Okay, this is a permanent 7-member panel established by the DSP, that is the dispute settlement body, in order to handle the appeals in the trade disputes. And when was it established? 1995, under Article 17 of what? Understanding and rules procedure governing the settlement of disputes. This is not important, but then you just have to know what is the governing structure of WTO. Okay. Now let's move on to the second article. This is BRICS. So right now, as I told you, Brazil is actually holding the presidency of BRICS. So now it has actually announced that Indonesia happens to be the latest member to join this particular grouping. Okay, so Indonesia. So earlier also, see, first there was only this particular grouping, that is BRIC. And then what happened? In 2010, you had South Africa that actually joined, and after that it became BRICS. And then you had number of nations that actually joined. Okay, so now current one is Indonesia, which is in 2025, and before that also you had Saudi, you had UAE, you had Egypt, you have Ethiopia, etc. Okay, so let us see, this is the group of nations that almost accounts for how much? 41% of the population of the globe or of the world, and with the inclusion of these many members, now it has increased to 50%. This is population, and also has around what? Holds around 24% of what? The world GDP, and now this has increased to 30%. And finally, if you actually see what is the total amount of trade, it is around 16 to 20%. Okay, so this is what is your global grouping, that is the grouping of BRICS. So here BRICS is nothing but it is a prominent it's a grouping of the emerging or the burgeoning economies. Okay, burgeoning economies means what? These are the developing economies which actually consisted of Brazil, Russia, then India, China and South Africa. Initially, BRIC was actually coined in the year 2001 by the economist Jim O'Neill in order to describe these developing organizations. Okay, then it actually established during the Ministry of BRIC meeting. All this is not important. Next one, in 2010, South Africa joined and it became the BRICS. How is the leadership structure? This actually rotates yearly. Okay, and that is how, if you see, in 2021 India actually hosted the presidentship or the chairmanship of this particular forum. And if you see the new members, you have Indonesia in 2025, and earlier 5 members were joined. Who are they? Iran, not Iraq, remember, Iran, Saudi Arabia, then UAE, Egypt as well as Ethiopia. These are the 5 members that actually joined this particular grouping of late. Okay. Next, what is the significance? I told you, right? This actually consists of the major developing nations. Here, they actually have a major proportion of the global demography as well as economic landscape. So, if you see, in terms of world population, it is 41, and 24 in terms of GDP and 16 in terms of trade. Whereas with the inclusion of new members, 41 has increased to 50. Then this particular GDP has increased to 30, as well as the world trade has increased to 25%. Okay. So this is what is the significance of this particular grouping. You can see current members. These are the older members, founding members, where you know South Africa joined in 2010, and then you have these are the 5 new members with Indonesia, which actually joined in 2025. Okay. So now, moving forward, let us see, there are few initiatives by the BRICS. First one is the establishment of New Development Bank that came up in 2014. Okay, so this was headquartered in Shanghai, China. So this actually provides the funding. Okay, so funding, infrastructure and sustainable development. So whatever is required for developing the infrastructure as well as the other sustainable development. Here what happens is that there is a new development bank that was established in 2014. The next one is actually nothing but your contingent reserve arrangement. This also came in 2014. 14 only. This is actually a framework in order to provide short-term loans to the economies or liquidity support to the member countries so that they have a better financial stability. Next one is the BRICS payment system. Okay, so earlier there were systems like SWIFT. Okay, SWIFT is nothing but it is the Society for worldwide interbank. You have financial telecommunication, that is nothing but what are all the global transfer of funds that are actually happening. So that was acknowledged and it was observed by swift. Okay, then what happened? Russia had to be moved out of this SWIFT system because of its conflict with Ukraine. So there has to be an alternative system, right? So that is why the BRICS payment system has actually come into force. Okay, so these are the key initiatives of BRICS. Okay, next one, the trade and cooperation. If you see, there are customs agreement with respect to what's the kind of trade that is happening, and in order to streamline this particular process so that there are smoother trade flows. Next one, technological advancements. There are remote sensing satellites. Okay, so there is a constellation that has been established by BRICS. Okay, so there are 6 satellites or the remote sensing satellites, where you can see the contribution are actually done. India contributes 2 satellites, so India contributes 2, and China also contributes to 2 satellites, and then you have Russia contributing 1 satellite, and 1 satellite is jointly by Brazil and China. Okay, so this is actually a constellation of 2 satellites. So 2 plus 2, 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so this is what is the article on BRICS. Next, let's move to G7. So the 50th group of 7, that is the G7 meeting, recently took place in Italy, where the Indian Prime Minister Mr. Modi had also participated. Now what is important for us is to understand what is this particular grouping, that is the G7 grouping. Okay, so it is actually an informal political as well as just give me a minute. Okay, so let us actually continue. So it is an informal political as well as an economic forum. So this consists of 7 of the world's advanced economies. Okay, how to remember the 7? So if you know UNSC, who are the members? You have UK, you have US, right? Then you have China, and then you have France, UK, US, China, France, Russia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So among these, UK and US are there. Okay, advanced members, UK and US are actually present. Then you have, along with France, you have 2 more European nations. What are they? Italy plus Germany. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. You just have 5, 6 and 7. Okay, so what are the other countries? It is actually Canada. Other country is Canada. Then one from Asia, that is actually Japan. Okay, now are there 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Do you understand? So remove China, put Japan, and instead of Russia, put Canada. That's it. So these are the G7 nations. Okay, so let's not get confused further. I will actually tell you. Okay, so this is an informal political and economic forum of 7 of the world's advanced nations, and you have who? 3 of the members from UNSC. Who are they? They are the United Kingdom, you have the United States, and then you have the France. Then you just have 4 more members. In the place of China, I am going to put Japan. Okay, and in the place of Russia, I am going to put Canada, and to France I will accommodate 2 more European nations, that is Italy and Germany. So these are the 5 nations, and additionally European Union, they actually have an observer status. So initially if you see, this grouping was only G6. Okay, then what happened? Canada actually joined India 1976 only, and that is how it became G7. Then an added member was there, Russia. With that, it actually became G8 in 1988. However, in 2014, it came back to the G7 format itself. Okay, the genesis, it was formed in 1975. Imagine during emergency. What emergency? Oil crisis. So because of oil crisis, this emergency was in India, no? during the Indira Gandhi period. So this is when the oil crisis was also running parallelly in the world, okay, and the financial crisis was there. The purpose was in order to coordinate, okay, then coordinate what? The economic policies across the globe as well as the other transnational issues. So this is what is the G7 grouping. Now I told you this one, right? So you have US, UK, Japan, Canada, France, Italy and Germany. So this is actually your G7 plus 1 is your G8, okay. So here remove Russia. So with this add Belgium, Netherlands, Sweden and Switzerland. It becomes G10. Actually it's a group of 11 countries. It's called as the G10 grouping, okay. And then when you add everything, whether if you add India, European Union, China, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Australia, South Korea, Mexico as well as African Union, then you have your G20 countries, okay. So you need to know all your groupings, very important, okay. Next one, let's move forward to see about the G7 grouping, okay. So if you see with respect to that of the global net wealth, it has 60% of the global net wealth because all these are developed nations, right? So 60% of the global net wealth, then 46% of the global GDP, and has only 10% of the world's population. The shared values of what? It actually has the value of liberal democracy, representative governance, transparency, pluralism, etc. Next, nature of grouping. It is informal and flexible. So it does not have a permanent secretariat or a headquarters. Very important. And also its decisions are actually non-significant only, but then it will be taken into consideration because these are advanced nations. So it will have much of a political weight. Next one, rotating member countries annual summits. They actually host the annual summits, and the European Union with the observer status is actually excluded from this particular chairmanship because they have observer status, you know. So this is what is your G7. Next one, let's move to Quad, okay. So quadrilateral security dialogue, it has actually completed 20 years of collaboration, okay. So in the 20 years of collaboration, however, it actually started as a humanitarian response initiative. Now it has transformed to a diplomatic or a strategic alliance, okay, where it is also facing a number of regional challenges and it is fighting against it. So this is what is your Quad or your quadrilateral security dialogue. The same thing, it has grown from humanitarian response in order now to address the in order to become a strategic alliance to address the ongoing regional as well as the global challenges. Now let's read about Quad. So quadrilateral security dialogue, it is also called as Quad, okay. So remember, this is actually only a strategic partnership. It is not a military or a defense partnership, okay, and it has only 4 countries. Who are the 4 countries? One is India, next one Japan, and then you have United States as well as Australia. So these are the countries. Why? It actually helps to establish stability as well as prosperity, okay, and resilience in the Indo-Pacific region, okay. They want to make this Indo-Pacific more open, more inclusive and based on rules-based order. So what do you mean by rules-based order? Here the countries or the decisions, the regulations as well as the rules have to be set as per what, or the countries actually have to collaborate based on the rules or the conventions that are taking place and not by force. So that is what is called as rules based order, okay. So the objectives are in order to face the regional and the global challenges, and also it actually takes care of health security, the climate change, the development of infrastructure, then cooperation, cyber security, the humanitarian assistance, then military security, then countering any kind of disinformation, then counter terrorism efforts, etc. Okay, so this is what is about Quad. Let's see how it actually originated. So In 2004 we had this Indian Ocean tsunami, right? So that was a huge catastrophe where the countries actually decided, these four countries decided to come together in order to provide humanitarian aid as well as assistance. Okay, so this was eventually established in 2007 by the efforts of the Japanese Prime Minister or leadership of Mr. Shinzo Abe. Okay, however, the group actually faced a lot of challenges because due to China's diplomatic as well as economic pressure, Australia had to move out of it in 2008. Okay, so China views this particular quad. China actually says that this particular quad is like NATO. Okay, so it is like the Asian form of NATO, and it actually sees this as a challenge because they are focusing on the Indo-Pacific region, right, where the Chinese also have their interest in Indo-Pacific region. How? Through their BRI, that is the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the claims that they actually have in the South China Sea, because of which they are actually seeing this as actually a challenging regional grouping, that is what to say, challenging its efforts. Okay, next one, in 2008, so what happens, there were a lot of diplomatic and economic pressure that was put forth by China on Australia, because of which China had to move from this particular quad. Okay, but it was a temporary withdrawal. Okay, so these are the countries who are involved in quad. You can actually see Australia here, you can see India, you can see Japan as well as United States of America. So this is actually Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so this is what is this article on Quad about. Now let's move forward to the International Criminal Court. Okay, so for the purpose of dispute settlement, we have certain tribunals that are set up, right? So even in case of UNCLOS, we had that International Tribunal on the Law of Sea in case there is some kind of disputes in demarcation of the boundary of the exclusive economic zone, the high seas, etc. So that is how we have this International Criminal Court also that was established. However, it is not a part of the United Nations. And what is part of United Nations? It is the International Court of Justice, because that was the highest dispute resolution or dispute resolving body of the United Nations. This is not a part of it. Why? There is no particular reason for why. It is just not a part of it. And also this ICC, it actually helps in punishing the individuals. However, ICJ focuses on dispute resolution between two different states who are part of it or who are part of the United Nations. Okay, then we will actually see what is it. So recently ICC issued a warrant in order to arrest the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay, why? Because he was accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity, that is genocide. Okay, killing a number of people. So this is what it is. Now we have to focus on what? This particular formation of the International Criminal Court. So we had the Rome Statute. So for a country to be a member of this ICC, first you must have ratified or adopted or adapted to this particular Rome Statute of 1998. Okay, so this actually formed in 2002. That is what ICC formed in 2002 under the Rome Statute of 1998. It is the only permanent international criminal, okay, underline, criminal tribunal. So it actually investigates the individuals who were involved in very heinous crimes like war crimes and tries them also, because if they cause any kind of damage to the humanity, crimes against humanity and crimes of aggression. Okay, so ICC was a successor to this international tribunal, which was actually earlier. Okay, the predecessor organization was this International Tribunal, and this was dealing with atrocities that were taking place in Yugoslavia and Rwanda, where it is headquartered, The Hague, Netherlands. Okay, next one. Let's move forward and see the membership. So as I told you, in order to be the member of the ICC, the country must ratify the statute to join, and around 124 nations are state parties to the Rome Statute. Okay, now Palestine has become the 123rd member, and in 2009 we actually have Malaysia, which became a part of it. Okay, very, very important. And there are non-member states. Of course, India is there, and China, Israel, Russia and United States. If you see the composition, it has 18 judges. So each judge is from a different country and elected to a non-renewable 9-year term. So the period is what? It is 9-year term, and after that it is not renewed also. Okay. Next one. Let's move forward and see the jurisdiction. So you have the International Court of Justice that actually deals with the disputes between the member states, right? But this actually prosecutes or involves in punishing the individuals, okay? And they can actually hear a case if the country where the crime occurred is a part of this particular Rome Statute. So whether it can, take the case or hear a case when it actually happened in India or not, you have to post your answer in the comment section. And if the perpetrator's country of origin is also a part of the Rome Statute. Next one. It can exercise its jurisdiction only if the national court is unable or unwilling to do so. Very, very important. Okay, so there is no suo motu case. Here it will actually see, for example, if India has ratified the Rome Statute or if it has signed the Rome Statute, after that if the Supreme Court is not able to take care of it or if it does not want to hear a particular case, then the ICC will take care. Okay. So in addition to this, ICC's jurisdiction is limited to offences only to the offences that was committed after the Rome Statute actually came into effect, okay, from July 1st, 2002, Rome Statute. So this is what is your Rome Statute, and let's see what is the enforcement, whether it is binding or not. So the decisions are binding. Okay, and then you need to know the court does not have any kind of its own police force, and it depends on the cooperation of states, which is crucial for the arrest and the surrender of the suspects. Okay, so what is the relationship it has with the United Nations is that Article 2 of the Rome Statute it talks about the relationship that ICC shares with the United Nations. It is not a UN organization. Okay, so it has a cooperation agreement with the UN. It is not under UN, it's not one of the organ or the specialized agency, but it has an agreement. And in cases where the situation is outside the court's jurisdiction, then what happens? This particular, that is the UN Security Council, can refer the matter. Okay, so if UNSC actually decides that a particular case is beyond the jurisdiction of UNSC, then it can refer the case to ICC, thereby granting the jurisdiction beyond the UNSC jurisdiction. So if you see, this is the difference between the ICC as well as the ICJ. I hope this is actually visible. Let me make it bigger for you people. Okay, so this is ICJ. It was actually formed with the formation of the United Nations, that is 1945, whereas this is 2002 and after Rome Statute of 1998. Okay. Now, what is the relationship? This is the highest court of the United Nations, which is involved in the dispute resolution between the states. So, highest court here, not part of the UN, but has an agreement with the UN. Next one, location. This is also the Hague, Netherlands. This is also in the UN member states are there. It actually it actually takes care of the dispute resolution between states. Here, it is punishing, okay, or trying the people who have actually committed heinous crimes like, the war against humanity, genocide, crime against them, etc. So tries the individuals. Next one, types of cases, legal disputes, and it requests for the advisory opinions on the legal questions. Here prosecutes the individuals on serious crimes under the Rome Statute. Appeals, whether you can actually appeal, no. Here, yes, because when UNSC feels that it's beyond its jurisdiction, here it can actually move the jurisdiction to the ICC. Next one, the enforcement power. Here, it does not have any enforcement power. It relies on the UNSC to uphold the judgments, where the permanent members of the UNSC have the veto power. Here also, again, nothing. It actually relies on the cooperation between the member states. However, the decisions of it are binding. Okay. So, this is what is the difference between the ICJ as well as the ICC. Now, let's move to the next article, that is AUKUS. Okay. So, it is actually a tripartite agreement between what? Australia, UK as well as the US. So, recently Australia under this AUKUS has actually signed a particular agreement in order to share the nuclear secrets as well as the material. So, let us actually quickly take a 1-minute break and then let us resume with this particular article. Okay. Any doubts, please do post in the comment section, okay, so we can solve. And also regarding the PPTs that we are actually having for this particular presentation, you can download the Narayana IAS Academy app, and corresponding to this particular lecture we will be posting the PPTs also, okay. So that is how we posted for environment ecology, the government schemes, as well as the reports and indices. And now you will actually have the PPTs uploaded for the international relations and the important regions in focus, okay. So next let's move to this particular article, that is AUKUS. So as I told you, Australia has signed a crucial deal under AUKUS with the United States and the UK. So this actually allows it to exchange the nuclear secrets as well as the materials, okay. So now it's important for us to understand what is this particular AUKUS. So it is a security alliance. Security alliance means you can actually infer that as it's major of a defense agreement, okay. So it is a trilateral security alliance which is formed between three nations, that is Australia, then United States and the UK, okay. So that is why Australia, United States, that's why it is Australia, UK as well as United States. It is AUKUS, and it came to existence in 2021 in order to focus on enhancing the defense capabilities or the technological advancements that these particular countries actually possess, okay. That is how you can see two components, pillar 1 and pillar 2 under this AUKUS, where under pillar 1 the focus is on where you have the developed countries or much more developed Australia, UK as well as US provide these technological advancement assistance to Australia, okay, in order to get the nuclear submarine. So that is how the assistance is provided. So this was announced in 2021 in order to enhance the defense capabilities, the technological advancement and the industrial capacity of the three nations. So you can actually see here you have what are the different countries. You have the UK, and then you have the USA, and then you have what? Australia. So these are what? These are your AUKUS nations. With US and Australia together, if you club this, then you have just India and Japan coming together in order to form the Quad. So this is Quad and this is AUKUS. So here intersection is what? US as well as Australia. If you see, Quad is more of a security dialogue, or it actually is a diplomatic dialogue which focuses on three factors. One is it focuses on regional security, okay, regional security, and then number 2 is economic development, and next one is also your infrastructural development. So this focuses on much more broader scope, okay, which is actually focused on the Indo-Pacific region, whereas this AUKUS is nothing but a military or a defense alliance which actually focuses on enhancement of technological advancement, then defense technologies and so on, okay. So this is about your AUKUS. Now moving forward, see, don't get alarmed by looking at this major big things. It is just that it is a there is a legally binding tripartite agreement, okay. So in order to, so under which, see, AUKUS has actually told, okay, your country will assist me, that is UK will assist Australia in order to enhance my technology, but that has to be under some binding agreement, right? And such an agreement is your NPR agreement. What is this? This is exchange of nuclear, that is naval nuclear propulsion information agreement, okay. So propulsion information agreement, recently seen in news, is a part of Quad, BRICS, AUKUS, etc. So now you need to know this is under AUKUS, okay. So the partnership focuses on two main pillars. I told you pillar 1, this is nothing but conventionally armed nuclear powered submarines. Here you have the developed nations, that is UK and the US, are assisting Australia in order to acquire nuclear powered submarines. Whereas pillar 2, this is focused on development of advanced capability. Okay, so advanced capability development, this is the joint efforts, okay, in order to develop advanced capabilities, particularly in the fields of cyber defense, artificial intelligence, then quantum technologies, and so on. Okay, so this is what it is. And then we saw what is AUKUS versus Quad. So this is actually, Quad is a strategic grouping that actually includes what? US, Australia, Japan, as well as India. We saw that, right? And here focuses on broader range of issues in the Indo-Pacific, that is merely your regional security, your economic growth and infrastructural development, whereas the AUKUS actually focuses on enhancing your defense capabilities. Okay, so this is what is your AUKUS and your Quad. Next one, let's move to understand what is this North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What do you mean by NATO? So recently, the United States President, Mr. Trump, actually said that if any of the allies of this North Atlantic Treaty Organization is not contributing monetarily to the defense under what? The collective security principle or the framework that we had established, then I will not back you up. Please move out, is what he actually told. Okay, so the US president actually said that US might not defend the NATO allies who do not meet the defense spending targets, as this actually undermines the collective security principle. This collective security principle was established under Article 5 to this particular NATO after the 9/11 attacks, okay, the terrorist attacks on the United States of America. So now let us understand what is this collective security principle. Before that, let's understand what is the membership, the eligibility of the nations to be there. And under this collective security principle, they feel that an attack on one ally is the attack on this entire grouping of NATO, and that is how everyone will join hands in order to, or they have the solidarity towards supporting that particular nation which has been attacked. Okay, so now we will look into what is this particular NATO. So this was actually established in the year 1949 through an agreement that is called as the Washington Agreement, or it's also called as the North Atlantic Treaty. So established in 1949 through Washington Treaty or the North Atlantic Treaty. Okay, so so in order to counter the expansion of the Soviet, okay, that is the USSR, which actually got disintegrated in 1991. So as a deterrent to the expansion of the Soviet post World War II. So that is why NATO was created. So what does it guarantee? In order to actually provide freedom and security of its members through the political and the military means. So who founded it? Initially it was only 12 countries who founded it, who actually are located in this Atlantic region, mainly the US, UK, you have Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, and then you have Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, etc. Okay, so these were the countries, and currently if you see, 12 has now expanded to 31 countries as of now. So this includes the recent addition. You need to remember that Finland joined it as late as 2023, and before that there was North Macedonia. So this joined in 2020. Okay, Finland joined it. Very, very important. Even if you see the BRICS grouping, who joined it, we have Indonesia joining in 2025. So you just need to know who are the members of the recent additions to this particular grouping. Okay, so here Finland joined it. So remember, a Scandinavian country joined it. Next one. Moving forward, about the membership, it actually has an open door policy. Okay, whoever abides by what, whoever contributes to the security of the Atlantic region, they can actually join this, and that is what Article 10 of the treaty, that is the Washington Treaty, actually say. Okay, so any European country that can enhance or contribute to the security of the North Atlantic area can join the alliance. And minimum requirements, there is actually an image, that is you need to have friendly ties with each other, you need to not interfere in the internal affairs, but you need to uphold the sovereignty. All that we will look. Okay, and then what is the procedure of acquiring the membership? So it involves a long process, and it actually requires the approval by all the members, that is the 31 existing member countries. Okay, So this is what it is. Now moving forward, as I told you, what are all the eligibility criteria is that the new members must uphold democracy, okay, and also at the same time they actually have to tolerate, or they have to be tolerant to diversity, okay. So this is number one. And then they actually have to make progress, okay, they must make progress towards a market economy, okay. It should not be a closed economy, okay, it has to be a market economy. And then their military should actually be under civilian control. The military should not control, but it has to be under civilian control. Like you have India, right? The military is under the control of the government. So it has to be, the military has to be under civilian control. Next one, they must be good neighbors and they must appreciate and respect the sovereignty of their borders. Next one, they must be working towards compatibility with the NATO forces, okay. So these are the eligibility. Now let's move forward and see what are the benefits you actually get by becoming a member of the NATO. That's what is your collective responsibility or the collective security principle. That is, there is this particular collective defense mechanism where they feel any kind of attack on one of the members is considered as an attack on the entire alliance, okay. So this is actually your added benefit. So NATO invoked this particular Article 5 because of the 9/11 terrorist attacks against the United States, and also there is military and security enhancement over here because you have access to enhanced military resources, okay. And then political influence is also there because increased global standing and influence in international security matters, okay. So what else is required when you actually have the backing of one of the predominant or the major powers of the world, okay, where you have countries like US, you have Netherlands, etc., who will actually back you up in this, okay. So this is what is about the significance of the NATO membership. If you talk about India, is India a part of NATO or not? No. India is not a part of this particular alliance because India mostly actually follows this principle of NAM, that is the non-aligned or non-alignment. So India always follows this particular non-alignment principle, okay. So however, there has actually been an increased coordination that India has been showing towards this particular organization on several lines like counter-terrorism, then cyber security measures, maritime security, etc. Next, India has also participated in various NATO exercises and training programs that has actually been conducted so far, okay. So this is about the membership of NATO. Now let's move forward to understand the combined maritime forces. Combined maritime forces is nothing but recently we have the INS Talwar. This has actually confiscated around 1000 kgs of drugs in the Arabian Sea area in one of the operations which it actually coordinated with the combined maritime forces. That is why this particular article is in the news. Let's see what is the combined maritime forces. So maritime, right? So it is a naval coalition, and where it is located? It is located in Bahrain, okay. It is based in Bahrain, okay. So what does it actually promote? Okay, so now you know it is something about maritime security and stability, right? So obviously it will promote security, then stability and prosperity across the international waters. So international waters, okay. And also it is based on IRBO, International Rules Based Order, okay. What do you mean by rules based order? All the countries have to collaborate based on the rules and the conventions that are actually brought forward and not by force. So it is actually based on or upholds the international rules based order, and it prevents this terrorism, and it prevents the act of piracy, and responds to humanitarian crisis and fosters regional cooperation, okay. So that by controlling all this, there is a peaceful maritime environment. So this is what is the most important mission of the combined maritime forces. If you see the member nations, so far we have 46 members, including Australia, Bahrain, then Brazil, then France, Canada. India is actually a part, very, very important. That is why it has actually confiscated. Next one, Pakistan as well as United States, okay. Now let us actually see what is the organizational structure. So there are 5 specialized task force under this combined maritime forces. Like for example, you have the combined task force 150. Okay, so if you see, this is near this Gulf of Oman. So Gulf of Oman security and counter terrorism. This is CTF, that is combined task force 150. Next one, you have combined task force of 151. This actually works towards what? Counter piracy. Then you have CTF 152, which is actually located in this Arabian Gulf region. So Arabian Gulf security cooperation. Okay, so this is the next one, 152. 153 is actually the Red Sea. Where is 153? This is Red Sea. Okay, so this is your Red Sea region. So Red Sea, or you can see the Gulf of Aden. So Gulf of Aden region. And next one is 154, which focuses on the security training for maritime security. Okay, so this is what it is. So here you can see specialized task forces 150 Gulf of Oman. Next one, 151 counter piracy. See, all these are not important by numbers, but you need to know there are different task force. Okay, so 154 maritime security training, 153 Red Sea, 152 is the Arabian Sea as well as the Gulf. Okay, in this region. Okay, so this is the task force. The next one, how does it actually function? So it actually sorry, so under this, nations may contribute from assigning liaising officers. Okay, so there has to be some officers that from every country, there has to be representative at the headquarters. Okay, so they have to provide warships and support vessels or maritime reconnaissance aircraft. And then there is voluntary participation only, because participation is not forced, it's entirely voluntary. Okay, no one is compelled to undertake the duties. Next one, it has a non-binding mandate. So the combined maritime forces, it is not governed by any political or military mandate. Okay, so there are flexibility in the amount of contribution that a country or a personnel can actually give. Okay, so this is what is your CMF. Next one, if you see the headquarters, we actually saw it is located in the operation is in Bahrain, right? And then it is co-located with the US Naval Central Command, that is the NAVCENT. It is the US Naval Forces. Okay, and the US 5th Fleet and the Naval Support, that is NSA Bahrain. And the command structure, all this is not important. It is led by a US Navy Vice Admiral, and then the Deputy Commander is there, and he happens to be the Royal Navy Commodore. All this is not very important. Okay, then again you have senior staff roles also at the headquarters, not important. So now you know what you mean by the combined maritime forces. Next, we will talk about the Five Eyes Alliance. Okay, very important. What do you mean by the Five Eye Alliance is that, see, these are the intelligence sharing nations. These are specifically the English speaking nations, which actually includes the US, Canada, then you have Australia, New Zealand as well as UK. Okay, so few months back, or you can say like around 8 to 9 months back, there was this killing of the Khalistan. You know the Khalistan movement, right? They wanted to establish a separate Khalistan over here in India, and the Sikh community. So what happened? There was actually the extended protests in Canada, and there was actually killing of this Khalistan extremist. Okay, and now Canada actually has allegations on India, stating that India actually has kind of links with respect to this particular killing. Okay, to which now New Zealand, one of the members of the Five Eye Alliance, has actually questioned the claims that Canada actually had on India. Okay, so that is why we need to discuss about what is this Five Eyes Alliance. Okay, now we will see Five Eyes Alliance is an intelligence sharing network. Okay, so there is coordination with respect to what? The signal sharing or the signal intelligence, which is called as signal intelligence. Okay, so SIGINT. Okay, among the neighboring countries, and it is an intelligence sharing network of English speaking nations, where you see US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. These are the Five Eyes. With this, if you actually include Netherlands, Norway, Denmark as well as France, so Netherlands, Norway, Denmark and France, it becomes the Nine Eyes Alliance. And to this, if you further add the bigs, that is Belgium, Italy, Germany, Spain as well as Sweden, then it becomes 14 eyes alliance. Okay, so you need to know what are the 5 eyes, the 9 eyes as well as the 14 eye alliance. Okay, now let's move forward in understanding what do you mean by signal intelligence. This is nothing but it is intercepting and deciphering the electronic communication that actually happens. It can either be your email, it can be your phone calls, or it can be any kind of electronic data, that is messages, etc. Okay, so this is what it is. Now, why it was actually established? It was established after World War II under the Cold War Soviet threat as part of the UK-USA agreement. So UK and USA got into an agreement saying that now USSR or the Soviet is actually going to be of threat, so we need to have the signal, intelligence sharing, and that is why the AUKUS agreement was signed in 1946. And there are different surveillance programs that actually are taken up by the Five Eye Alliance, like the PRISM, the Tempora, the X Key Score. Then you have the Star Room, Echelon, Muscular. All these are different programs. And then you have the expansion beyond 5 eyes. It includes 9 eyes. Okay, I told you to include what? Norway, Netherlands, as well as Denmark and France. And then 14 eyes where you included the bigs, that is Belgium, Italy, Germany, and then you have Sweden as well as Spain. That became your 14 eyes. Next article is G4, L69 and C10. So these are all groupings that also took up India's stance on proposing the immediate reforms of the United Nations Security Council. You know, United Nations Security Council actually has 5 permanent members, like you have the US, UK, we have the France, Russia as well as China, and these have the veto power. Okay, and even if one person actually abstains from voting, that means the resolution stays unpassed. Okay, so that is why India becoming a permanent member of UNSA is also not being passed and not being possible. Okay, so this is what is the UNSA. It is one of the major decision making organs of the United Nations. So now we have the different other groupings also, like the G4, we have the G4, because India on behalf of G4 only had actually proposed the model recommendations for the reforms of UNSC. So you have the G4, the L69 and the C10. These groupings reiterated the urgent need for the reforms of the United Nations Security Council in order to expand or to make it more inclusive as well as representative. Okay. So now let us actually move forward and see what are these groupings. Okay, first let us see what is this L69 grouping. So this majorly consists of 42 developing nations. So 42 developing nations from Asia. Okay, so including India, then it has nations from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean and the Pacific. Which Pacific mean you have the small island developing states, not the developed ones. Okay, so Asia, Africa, Latin America and Caribbean. What is the demand is please expand the representation of the United Nations Security Council in both the permanent member category, which was actually 5, plus the non-permanent members of which India is a part, and you have 10 members as non-permanent members. So UNSC has 15 members. Okay, and the 5, apart from 5 members, there are 10 non-permanent, right? They are actually elected from different regions. Okay, one is the African region, and then you have the Asia Pacific region, then you have the Latin American and the Caribbean region, then you have the West European region and the East European region. So over here different numbers of seats are given, 3, 2, 2, 2 as well as 1. So these are the non-permanent members. Now these countries are saying please expand the representation. Okay, and then so that we actually can meet the real and the contemporary global challenges that we are facing. So the nomenclature is, it actually sets its name from the draft document L69, which I actually tabled in 2007-2008, which initiated the IGN process, that is intergovernmental negotiations. Okay, process for United Nations Security Council reform. So this is your L69 grouping. Okay, so 42 developing countries. Don't think it has 69 countries. The name actually came from the documentation, that the draft document L69. Okay, So this is what it is. Next one is the G4 grouping. Okay, so G4 actually has what? India, Brazil, Germany as well as Japan. So these are the G4 countries. Okay, so here the G4 nations want to become the permanent members of UNSC. So that is why they actually came up with a proposal where they said expand the UNSC membership. So you already have 15 members, now make this as 25 members, okay, where you actually have to add 6 members, that is permanent members, as well as 4 non-permanent members. So this is how you're going to make it extra 10, that is 25, okay. Next, the meetings, they actually traditionally meet on the sidelines of the annual UNGA meeting in order to discuss their bid for permanent membership, okay. So this is what is G4. It's very easy, okay. So add 5 permanent members, sorry, according to the 5 permanent members, these are 5 permanent members, right? So increase this 5 permanent members by adding 6 more members. This is what it is telling, okay. And then you have 10 non-permanent members, all these are here. So this is not important. So now let's move on to understand the committee of 10, that is the C10 grouping. So what do you mean by the C10 grouping is that it consists of 10 African nations and institutions. So this includes Algeria, it includes countries like Botswana, Cameroon, Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and all these grouping. The objective here is to advocate for the consensus, okay. So this actually calls for what? At least 2 permanent seats for Africa with the veto power in the UNSC. So this is very unlikely, it won't happen mostly, but anyways. And then let's talk about the Azul-Winnie consensus. This is called as Azul-Winnie consensus. So it is a common position of the African Union on the reforms that has to be taken place in the UNSC, which was adopted way back in 2005, pushing for the permanent representative status of the Africa or the African Union in the UNSC. So this is what is the grouping, that is L69 we saw, and then we spoke about the G4 countries, and then we actually discussed about the committee of 10, which actually consists of the African regions. Now we'll talk about the G4 countries versus the UFC, that is called as the Coffee Club, okay. So Coffee Club is nothing but it is also the name given for uniting for consensus, okay. So the Coffee Club, which is officially known as uniting for consensus, this concept actually emerged in 1990s, and this was actually a movement exposing, or you can say it opposed the expansion of the permanent seats in UNSC. They said that there is no need for a permanent seat of UNSC. That is why your countries, you countries actually have a veto power, and you are superior comparatively. Okay, so that is what is this Coffee Club, officially known as Uniting for Consensus, and emerged in the year 1990. This was actually a move opposing the expansion of what? The permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. So this seeks to prevent the addition of more permanent members and advocates for a consensus based approach, okay, to reform, and this actually favored the expansion of non-permanent seats instead, okay. So they said don't further expand or add members to the permanent council. Instead of that, non-permanent members can actually be expanded. The members of this include Italy, Pakistan, South Korea, then you have Mexico, Argentina, Spain, Canada, as well as Australia. So this is actually the UFC, that is Uniting for Consensus Club, or it is also called as the Coffee Club. Now, opposition to G4. So this particular G4, where India is also part of it along with Brazil, Japan, as well as Germany, this Coffee Club counters the bids of G4 countries, okay, because G4 countries actually wants to have permanent membership in the US, because United Nations Security Council, because they feel that when that happens, there's going to be the concentration of power on specific countries, okay. So they are saying that please focus on regional balance instead of concentration of power. And the next one, regional rivalries, is that the group actually consists of nations that oppose their regional competitors from gaining permanent seat in the UNSC, okay, because Pakistan is there, okay. So this obviously will oppose India. Okay, and Italy is there. Italy is going to oppose Germany. Okay, and again Argentina is there, that's going to counter Brazil. So this is what is the UFC club. Okay, so now you understood what is this particular article or the topic that we actually discussed about. Okay, so now we will move on to the next topic, or the next topic is asset recovery interagency network of the Asia Pacific. Okay, so recently India actually had represented, or the representation was given by the Directorate of Enforcement, that is the ED, and this has been included in the steering committee of this particular asset recovery interagency of the Asia Pacific. Okay, so here I think with this article we will, with the previous article we will actually stop with our discussion, so that tomorrow we will be continuing with the remaining of the international agencies. Okay, so now let me give you a count. Today we had almost completed 11 topics, right? So tomorrow we will have, okay, so you have 9 more articles tomorrow, and along with that we will actually take up few of the regional groupings, like we have the ASEAN, we have the RCEP, and then we have SARC, we have BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative, okay, for multi-sectoral, this one, and then you have the Mercosur. So we will actually take up, and after that we will move forward to geopolitics and agreements. Okay, so that will be in our next to next class. Okay, and after that we will discuss important locations and then military exercises. So we will hardly have around 3 to 4 more classes where we will try to complete maximum of the topics. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. With this, let's actually wind up today's session. Okay, and we will actually continue tomorrow with the remaining interesting topics. So please do watch this course diligently, because we've picked up and we have curated the most important content based on the PYQ and the kind of questions that UPSC has been coming up with. So thank you all for watching this. Please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel, and I will meet all of you in the next live session, that is tomorrow positively. So thank you so much and have a good day.